Welcome to Meaningful Judaism, where we try to answer why we do what we do in Jewish life. So many of our practices can feel like they're just there. We do them, but we're not connected to them. We don't feel their meaning. In this podcast, we search for that meaning by diving deep into the Torah text. Meaningful Judaism is a product of Aleph Beta Labs, and I'm your host, Imu Shalev. Welcome to another episode of Meaningful Judaism. Our topic today is cheeseburgers, or why they're verboten, just totally forbidden. We're going to talk about why we can't mix milk and meat together. This episode is the second in our series on Kashrut. You can find the first episode in our podcasting feed, but you don't need to listen to it in order to enjoy this episode. For this episode, I partnered with Aleph Beta scholar and editor Beth Lesch, and I think we should just jump right into the conversation with her that recounts my journey to get to the meaning behind milk and meat. Here's me and Beth. Okay, Beth, welcome. Welcome back to our Kashrut investigations.
Thanks, Imu. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So what I wanted to talk to you about today is another major Kashrut law, and that is the law against mixing milk with meat. Basar v'chalav.
The cheeseburger law.
The cheeseburger law. So Beth, knowing the laws against milk and meat, what are the most frustrating parts of the laws against eating milk and meat for you?
Okay. Yeah. Practically, it's inconvenient. Like I'm a little bit of a foodie. I like Googling new recipes and trying things out. And it sometimes it feels a little bit like kashrut is this handicap. It's like, oh, wait, no, can't make that one. Oh, well, choose a new recipe. So there's a little bit of that, the
idea of a steak being seared in butter in a cast iron skillet, that looks good. It looks good when I see it on...
Everything else seared in butter is delicious. Like, butter makes everything better. Butter should make steak better. So, yeah, I feel like it's delicious and I'm missing out a little bit. And, yeah, I don't know. That's a little bit annoying.
But I don't think that's the most frustrating part of not mixing milk and meat together.
Oh, are you pointing out the fact that my kitchen is ridiculous? Is that what you're getting at? I have, 12 big plates, 12 small plates, 12 bowls, forks, knives, spoons, food processor, yada, yada, yada. And then I have a whole duplicate set of the same exact thing, but for meat. One's dairy, one's meat. And we have 2 sinks, and we have to be very careful not to mix them. And the best part of all is when a friend who doesn't keep kosher is at my house hanging out, and they want to help, and they say, can I help do your dishes? And I'm like, oh, yeah, you totally can. Just please make sure to pour your coffee into the right side of the sink. And by the way, don't turn on water that's so hot that it would burn you. Like, they think I'm crazy, right? Mm-hmm. It honestly sounds insane.
Yeah, it does sound insane. Like, there are non-Jews who will come into my kitchen and be like, oh, wow, like, why do you have 2 sinks? And as if this is any explanation, we'll be like, oh, one is for dairy and one is for meat. Right? It's the most absurd thing. Like,
this one is for peanut butter.
Exactly. It's so random. But like, this law of not mixing milk and meat together just expresses itself in a lot of expense and a lot of weird rules.
Yeah.
Like, there's, here in Teaneck, the real estate of your house is significantly different if your kitchen is big enough to support 2 sides. 2 sinks, right? If you want to do construction, if you want your house to be saleable, it really needs to have a kitchen that supports this law.
Yeah.
But that wasn't even the most frustrating thing that I was thinking about. You know the most frustrating thing?
What were you thinking about?
The most frustrating thing is like, for people who wait, 6 hours between milk and meat, right? You're like, you don't want to be fleshik all day. So like, people avoid meat. They're avoiding,
I know. I went to the supermarket Erev Rosh Hashanah to get some prepared kosher food for our meal, and I was at the counter, and it was like 9:30 in the morning, and there was one meat thing that looked good, and I asked the woman behind the counter, I was like, "Do you like it? Is it worth it? Is it good?" And she was like, "Yeah," and she sliced off a piece and handed it over to me, and I was like, "Are you crazy? You think I want to take a bite of that meat at 9:30 in the morning? Like, there's like so much opportunity to, like, who knows who's going to come and offer me an ice cream cone, And
you have to always be calculating, like, do I want to be, dairy right now, or do I want to be fleshik?
It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's huge, and it really just comes from this one law of do not mix milk and meat together. But the truth is, I'm really just hyping this up. I think for me, like, I don't have a problem not eating cheeseburgers, and I'm pretty used to waiting in between milk and meat. I think the reason we're doing this, we're pointing this out, is like, I think there is great meaning in some of the laws and rituals that we just don't even bother asking the questions about anymore. We just kind of like get used to the ritual. And what we're trying to do here is poke at that. We're trying to say like, look, this isn't just a law. This is a law with tremendous consequence and a lot of frustration, and it impacts a lot of our life. To not know the meaning behind this law really is, I think, a shame, because it does control for so much of our lives. So now that we know the stakes, we start our journey into the text to find some answers. Okay, so like if we're trying to get at the meaning behind milk and meat, classically in Aleph Beta land, where do we look?
At the Torah.
Exactly. Great. So come with me into Exodus 23, which is the first time the Torah gives us this law. It's in Parshat Mishpatim. And here it is, the verse that hopefully will tell us the meaning behind not mixing milk and meat. And it's Lo tivashel gdi b'chalev imo, right? You shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk. It doesn't say don't mix milk and meat together. It says don't cook a kid in its mother's milk.
Let me just want to be crystal clear. Nowhere in the Torah does it say don't eat a cheeseburger. If you're looking for a source, this is as good as it gets.
Exactly. And in fact, many people get frustrated by, the rabbinic interpretation of this biblical law. And they say like, wow, you really made a mountain out of a molehill. I'm not going to cook a baby goat in its mother's milk because I'm not a monster. But I, don't have a problem eating a cheeseburger. That's an entirely different thing.
Right. And then I guess, so as a reader of the text, the question I have is, why would the Torah choose to word it this way? Like, let's give the rabbinic tradition the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, rabbis, I know you have a lot of rules about how to interpret things, and like you followed your rules and you got from A to B, but the Torah could have just said it more plainly, could have said, don't mix milk and meat, don't benefit from milk and meat, don't have cheeseburgers, have 2 dishwashers. So why would the Torah opt not to have said it more clearly?
Exactly. And even setting that aside, there's also another problem. Let's pretend the verse did say straight out, never mix milk and meat. It still doesn't tell us why, right? It doesn't say lo tefashel gdi b'chalev imo leman, right? So that you will, be godly. It doesn't tell you anything. It just says don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. Nothing else.
Okay.
So that feels a little bit like a dead end, right? But I kind of pulled one over on you, Beth. Like, what's the obvious thing I didn't do in this verse with you?
You didn't read the whole verse, Emo.
I didn't read the whole verse. This is just the second half of the
charlatan.
verse. Yes, I've been accused of that many times. That's right. This verse we've been reading, Exodus 23:19, it actually has a whole other half to it. And that's potentially really important. Context can be a game changer in trying to understand what the Torah is getting at. So we widen our lens a bit and see if looking at the whole verse together changes anything.
Okay. You want me to read it? Yeah. Okay. Reshit bikurei admatcha, the best of the first fruits of your land. Tavi beit Hashem Elokecha, you should bring them to God's house. Salav bikurim, at the start of the harvest, the most beautiful lemons that are ripening on your tree, bring those to the Kohen.
Lo tevashel gdi b'chalev imo, don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. Right? Okay, so if we're looking for context, we actually get something that seems extremely random, right? You have don't cook a kid in its mother's milk, and you have bring bikurim, right? Bring your first fruits to the temple, right? It sounds like the two most unlike laws you could ever pair together.
Yeah. Just my gut reaction, what is bikurim about? It's about showing thanks to God. And what is not boiling a kid in its mother's milk about? Like, it has nothing to do with showing thanks to God. So I don't know where this leads me.
So we thought we had some context that would help us. Didn't pan out. But I decided to double down. If getting a little context didn't help, maybe the best move was actually to get even more context. And it turns out that the 2 laws in verse 19, they were actually part of a set of 4 laws across verses 18 and 19. And they kind of formed their own little section. So we decided to go back just one verse and see if widening the lens a tiny bit more would help. Why don't you read verse 18?
Okay. Lo tizbach al chametz dam zivchi. So you should not offer up a sacrifice. You shouldn't offer an offering up to me with chametz. Like you shouldn't put the korban that you're offering up to God, the animal korban, on top of a piece of leavened bread. That's what it means?
Mm-hmm. Basically, don't bring chametz as part of a korban.
Don't bring chametz as part of a korban. And velo yalin chalev chagi ad boker. So don't let the fat of my feast, but I think means the korban that I'm enjoying, maybe the korban from a festival, don't leave it overnight.
Right. So if I'm bringing a sacrifice, if I'm buying an entire animal, and we didn't eat everything at night, well, I'd love to take home the leftovers, right? But I don't want to get rid of it. So the law is you can't leave it over until the morning. You need to consume it that night. No leftovers.
Okay.
That's it. Like, these are the laws. Looking here, I'm investigating what is the meaning behind milk and meat, and I feel like I'm getting stuck after stuck, right? Like, it doesn't tell you the meaning. The first half of the verse connects it to Bikurim somehow, and if you zoom out a little bit more, then we have 4 random laws, right? Don't bring chametz on the Mizbeach. Do not leave over from a chag offering till the next morning. Bring first fruits. Don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. 4 weird, strange laws that seem to have nothing to do with one another.
Yeah, Where are we going to go with this?
So my theory is that if we can find the way that these 4 laws are all related, that they're all part of the same idea, then we'll have some conceptual framework that will shed light on that last law, lo tevashel gdi b'chalev imo. So, on our journey to discover the meaning behind separating meat and milk, we now have to figure out how to take 4 laws that seem to have nothing to do with each other and find some commonality, something that explains how they form a unit. And I had an idea of where to start. So, when I first got here with my chavrusa Ari Levison, we took a look at these 4 laws. We stood back and said, okay, what are some commonalities that pop out at us? And Ari noticed something really interesting. It had to do with the first half of verse 18 and the first half of verse 19. Don't bring chametz and bring bikurim. So here's what Ari noticed. Chametz is something we normally talk about when?
Pesach.
On Pesach. And bikurim is something we normally talk about when?
Shavuos.
Right? Shavuot we call Chag HaBikurim. It is the holiday of bikurim, and it is like probably the only biblical law, one of the only biblical laws related to Shavuot, right, to bring Bikurim. So we've got 2 out of the 4 of these laws, right? One is a Pesach law, and the other one is a Shavuot law, right?
Okay. Are you going to tell me now that the other parts of the verse, like one of them is Tu B'Shvat and the other one is Yom Kippur? Like, do they each have their own holiday?
Let's see. Let's take a look at it. Let's see. Let's take a look at Lo Yalin Chalev Chagi Ad Boker. All right, so first of all, what kind of offering are we talking about here? Don't leave over the fat of what?
Chagi.
What does that word mean?
Chag, my festival.
Yeah, so now let's think about the actual law. Don't leave over any of the holiday offering until the morning. So the truth is, we've actually seen that law in the Torah before, and we've seen it connected to a specific holiday. It's one of the rules of the Korban Pesach. If you come with me to Exodus 12, when we're taught the laws of Korban Pesach, one of the laws that gets taught about it is that you actually need to eat the Korban Pesach that night. And it says in Exodus 12:10, "V'lo totiru mimenu ad boker." You shall not let anything remain until the morning. Right? So if we're looking back at verse 18, we're taught a Pesach law, seemingly, right? Don't bring chametz on the Mizbeach. And then we have another Pesach law, Lo Yalin Chalev Chagi Ad Boker. And don't leave that Chag offering until the next morning. The next verse begins with a Shavuot law, right? Bring Bikurim. And then the second half of the verse, Lo Tevashel Gdi B'chalev imo, the algebra suggests, right? What?
There should be something Shavuos-ish about it.
There should be something Shavuos-ish about it. So the pattern we uncovered is that these 4 laws are holiday laws. The first 2 are Pesach laws, and the pattern suggests that the second 2 should be a pair of holiday laws as well. If the third law, Bikurim, is clearly a Shavuot law, That suggests that the fourth law should also be a Shavuot law. But that leaves us with a new problem. Right? It would suggest that lo tevashel gdi b'chalev imo is only true on Shavuot. Right?
So, right, but we know that it's not. We know that you can't eat cheeseburgers all year round and then just desist on Shavuos.
Right. So we've got to observe it all year round. So some things doesn't fit.
So dead end?
Dead end, maybe. Or if we stand back and cock our head a little bit, we actually take a look at some of these.
Like this? Like to the side?
Other side.
Well, that does help.
Yeah.
That does help.
Yeah, so when I noticed this, it made me take a second look at the rest of the laws here, and I realized something kind of crazy, which is that all these laws, even though they're connected to the holidays, they actually have a year-round expression. Like the first one, lo tizbach al chametz dam zivchi. We assume that because it was talking about chametz, that it was a Pesach law, but it's not written in language that specifically references Pesach. It really sounds like it's a rule all year round. And even if this verse here is actually referencing Pesach, which is, by the way many commentaries read it, regardless, it's still actually true that the idea in the verse applies all year round. Like, if you look at other places in the Torah, that actually bears out. It's true that you cannot bring chametz into the Mizbeach all the time. So it's not just limited to Pesach. And if you look at them, all four of the laws here seem to follow that same pattern. So actually, maybe these are not laws that are constricted to a holiday, but maybe that they are holiday-like, right? Or that there's some energy of the holiday that is bound up with these laws. So we're trying to find the commonality across all the laws. And it feels like every time we try to take a step forward, something gets in the way. Is the common thread holidays? That almost works, but it doesn't really fit with the law of milk and meat. And now we have a new theory. Maybe the common thread is that they're year-round laws that have a connection to the holidays. But there's a problem with that too. And I'm talking here about chametz. Think about it. How could chametz be anything but a holiday law? Doesn't it commemorate leaving Egypt in a hurry during the Exodus? That's a Pesach thing, not a random Tuesday thing. And yet it really feels like it's a random Tuesday thing. The Torah really does say that chametz is never allowed with sacrifices any day of the year. So when trying to fix one issue, we just found another. And I'll just say we're trying to figure out milk and meat here, so this may feel like a bridge too far, but I actually think asking questions about this law, about lo tizbach al chametz dam zivchi, is going to lead us to the key to understanding all four of these laws, and eventually lo tevashel gdi b'chalev imo.
All right, I'm intrigued. Show me what you're thinking.
So what's the reason when you think about why we get rid of chametz? What's the reason for that?
Okay, so the reason is we were leaving Egypt, but we didn't have enough time for our dough to rise. So every year for the days of Pesach, we eat bread that also hasn't had enough time for the dough to rise. We eat unleavened bread as a remembrance back to the night that they left Egypt.
So we assume that the reason why we observe the laws of getting rid of chametz is because we left Egypt in a hurry and yada, yada, yada. The bread didn't have enough time to rise. That actually leads us to three problems. The first problem is, why would God be celebrating that detail all year round in the Mikdash? Why does God not allow chametz, in the house all year round? It's like my mom who never allowed chametz in the basement all year round, to make Pesach cleaning easier. Is that what it is for God? Is that he's very worried about the Pesach
Your mom was
cleaning?
She was very frum. She was all year round commemorating
She's a godly woman.
The fact that the Egyptians left in a haste. Of course she is. That's a great question. Why would God all year round be commemorating the fact that we left in a haste?
It's absurd.
Yeah, I hear that.
So that's our first question about chametz. The second is, while we're playing with this assumption that the reason why we get rid of chametz is because we left Egypt in a hurry, if you look back at Exodus 12, isn't it interesting that we actually get the commands to get rid of chametz from our homes before we ever left Egypt? So this is before the 10th plague. God actually tells Moses to tell the people a whole bunch of laws around the Korban Pesach, and he tells them.
Right. We get all these laws about what we're going to eat that night and also how we're going to celebrate the holiday for future years, and matzah is on the menu. That's so weird.
Yeah, totally. And not only is matzah on the menu, but there's this command where God says, Tashbitu se'or mibatechem. You should get rid of or take a break from all leavening in your houses. So not only does God seem to have a problem with Chametz all year round, which doesn't really make sense if Chametz is just about leaving Egypt, but also God gave us the command to get rid of Chametz before we even left Egypt. But there's a third question that I have. You ready for it?
I'm ready.
So even if we take that reason very seriously, that the reason why we get rid of Chametz is because we left Egypt in a hurry, right? And our dough didn't have time to rise. So what did we get with our dough?
Matzah. We had matzah.
Right, what they made was matzah, right? And so God's like, I'm going to institute every year as just a symbol to remember how great it was that you left so quickly. Your dough didn't even have time to rise. We're going to make matzah holiday, and everyone's going to make matzahs to remember this amazing event. So what's strange to me is you could commemorate that you left quickly by eating matzah. Why do we need to get rid of all the chametz? And let me just take this question a step further. There's another symbol on the night of Pesach that we use to remember the experience of the Exodus.
I know this one. Yeah, maror, the bitter herb.
Yeah, and that's
it's not like we're not allowed to have sweet herbs or whatever. We don't have to put away all of the like broccoli and I don't know, sweet things. We don't have to put them out of our houses. We just have the maror.
Right? It's not like God is so threatened by, the other herbs that will cloud out the maror. So we need to get rid of it. Right? So even just the explanation at face value that we don't eat chametz because we left Egypt in a hurry, it just doesn't seem to hold up. So there has to be something inherently problematic about chametz itself. So I think we should try and figure out what that could be. Before we go any further, let's just remember where we are and how we got here. We're trying to figure out why chametz would never be allowed in the temple all year round. And the reason we're even talking about that is because the law of chametz is linked to the law against mixing milk and meat. They're part of the same group. And the theory is, if we understand the deeper idea behind one, we're hoping it will reveal the deeper idea behind the other. So I know it seems like we're far afield from milk and meat, but I promise you that if you dive deep with me into chametz, we'll come out of it with a key that will help us understand kashrut as well. All right, let's do it. So, what could possibly be wrong with chametz that makes it something God doesn't want with his offerings ever? The truth is, I think we already got a clue back when we read about the first time that God commands us about getting rid of chametz. So back in Exodus 12, remember the language there? The word that the Torah uses is tashbitu. There's something strange about it.
Oh, wait, is that like tashbitu is like Shabbat?
Yeah, right? Like God didn't say, incinerate the chametz in your midst. The word is Shabbat. He said tashbitu. It's a very strange word to use for getting rid of something. It's take a break from or take a rest from chametz. I think the Torah is evoking the language of Shabbos with chametz for a reason. It's trying to make you think about Shabbos. And here's what I'll argue. Shabbos is a rest from human creativity. When we work for 6 days, when we're creating, we're little creator, and God above us is the big creator, we take 1 day out of every 7 to recognize the fact that there is a greater creator than us. So we desist from creativity, and we recognize that the world was created by God. That's not the only reason we keep Shabbos. And there's another element of Shabbos which sort of harmonizes, which is that when we are always creating, you can sometimes objectify that which you create, right? You can start trying to treat everything and everyone as a means to help create and produce, right? So a major element of Shabbos is giving your workers a rest, giving slaves, maidservants, even your son, your daughter, anyone dependent on you takes a break. Because when you're always creating, when you're always working, you can sometimes objectify. So you take a break and 2 things happen simultaneously. The people beneath you get a break, and you recognize source, you recognize God above, you recognize the master creator. So if you understand the idea behind Shabbos conceptually as taking a break from creativity, then might it make sense to consider that whenever we do something that is super creative, maybe the great human endeavors also warrant a Shabbos. And crazy as it sounds, I actually think that chametz is one of the greatest human technologies to ever have been invented, which I know is going to sound absurd in 2023, but it would not have sounded absurd thousands of years ago.
Can you walk me through that? It's bread making chametz is a technology?
Yes. So you actually need to go way back to the agricultural revolution, when humanity transitions from hunter-gatherers to domestication of plants and animals. Because pre-agricultural revolution, you have a humanity that is picking fruit off the tree, they're picking berries off the bush. They're directly connected to the source of their food. They know exactly where it comes from. Beth, when you want an apple, when you want berries, where do you go? What trees are you picking it off from?
Oh, I go to the refrigerator tree.
Right, you're picking it from the refrigerator, where you probably got it from the store, where it was originally on the back of some truck that got from the co-packer that went to the farmer, right? Like, the amount of steps between your fruit and the source of that fruit is enormous.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't the case when humanity was hunter-gatherer. They knew exactly where their fruit came from, and they were directly connected to the source, to the ground, and to God. Comes the agricultural evolution, where there's this burst of innovation, and humanity begins to domesticate plants, right? The relationship to the plants changes. What humanity begins to do is they process grain, where this grass, wheat, the seeds from this grass is ground into flour, and that flour is mixed with water and baked into bread. When you have a loaf of bread, it looks nothing like the grass, right? An apple looks like an apple. It grew from the tree. Apples grow on trees. Bread does not grow on grass. It has to be processed and turned into a new creation. I think in that sense, bread really is this huge, innovative technology. And by the way, the idea that bread is something innovative and like this super creative step for humanity, I think it's more than just a nice theory. I think there's actually corroborating evidence for this in, of all places, the Garden of Eden, at the very beginning of Torah. Think about the Garden of Eden, where God tells humanity to eat from all the fruits of the tree. Right? That may be describing humanity in its infancy, humanity pre-agricultural revolution. We are connected to God. We're in God's garden. We're eating from all the fruits. We have a direct connection to source. But then the strangest of things happens. We eat from this tree of knowledge. And one of the opinions in the Gemara about what that tree was that it was wheat. And how do they know that? Because God says to Adam, after he eats from the tree, B'zayata pecha tochal lechem. By the sweat of your brow you shall eat bread. Bread. There's been no bread up until this time in the Torah, right? They were in a garden. They were eating fruits. So possibly what's happening is this is the description of a humanity that is turning their backs on the direct one-to-one connection with the land, with God, with source, and saying, you know what, God? I think I can do better than fruit. I'm going to take this stuff, I'm going to process it, and I'm going to turn it to bread. That baking of bread may have been an original sin, a way of actually distancing ourselves from Creator.
That's just a crazy thought. I'm not used to thinking of bread as being spiritually evil. I mean, like we have challah. What could be more religious than challah on your Shabbos table, right? But you're saying that bread, it results unintentionally in your being more distanced from your Creator. You're being less aware of God as the source of everything, the source of our food, or maybe even something really insidious, which is like maybe it's even our attempt to distance ourselves. Like we don't want to just have the fruit that God readied for us. We want to take it into our own hands and make something better, or make something that we we were the soul makers of it. It's a really provocative thought.
Yeah, and I think that, Judaism ultimately isn't a Luddite religion, right? It's not anti-technology or progress. Like, there's no command to return to the garden and to only eat fruits, right? Instead, what I think happens is that Judaism sort of incorporates humanity's creative impulses, but it always directs you to use your creativity in the context of the ultimate creator, right? You actually are supposed to recognize source in your creativity. So we have this idea of Shabbos where you work, you're allowed to create, but you take one day to recognize the creator. We say, Hamotzi lecha min haaretz, the bracha we make on bread is an absurd bracha, right? It basically says, bless you, God, for bringing forth bread from the earth. which is crazy. Bread doesn't grow in the earth, as we said, right? It's a grass. We process it and we turn it into bread. But I love the wording of that bracha because it is a reminder to us to do that intentionality, to do that thought work, to say, hey, this bread, which distances me from source, I'm going to meditate on it, so to speak, when I make this blessing, to remember where this bread actually comes from, even though there are many steps of processing between, the growth to my actual having bread on the table. So when the Torah says tashbitu, take a Shabbos from bread making, it's starting to make sense. Bread is a huge deal, creatively speaking. But the truth is, the Torah doesn't tell us to take a Shabbos from bread making. It tells us to take a Shabbos from Chametz, which is an aspect of more modern bread making. Up until now, Adam in the garden, humanity for thousands of years, if we're trying to picture them making their bread and turning their backs on God, what are we picturing? These fluffy white challah loaves, right? But that would be totally anachronistic. For thousands of years, all bread was matzah. The technology for making chametz hadn't yet been invented. What happened in human history was there was a second technology introduced thousands of years after bread making was invented, where they discovered the means to create these starters, right? These sourdough starters, which would leaven the bread. All bread for thousands of years was essentially matzah. Nobody had the technology to gather sourdough or yeast and to breathe new life into the bread. And many historians believe that the inventors of sourdough, the inventors of chametz, was Egypt. What the Egyptians invented was this technique of really breathing life. Right? What happens when you leave your dough to rest when it's mixed with sourdough or some leavening agent is you walk away from it for a while and it becomes bigger. Right? Like in the ancient world, that was unheard of. You don't leave your apple on the counter and then it becomes massive apple, right? After processing this grain, you'd come back and it would grow in size.
Then what I also hear you saying, which is very cool, is that there's a way in which bread making is kind of creator-like. Like you're Dr. Frankenstein. You're bringing something to life. It's the idea of bread growing, like taking something organic and being able to make it grow to be bigger than it is. Like you said, we can't do that with an apple. So that in and of itself feels like the kind of thing that only a creator can do.
So what I'm arguing is that chametz needs a Shabbos, right? It's the height of human creativity. And the Torah doesn't say you can't do it. But for 1 week out of the year, we actually take a break and we eat a more simple bread. And we return back to a more clear recognition of source. We leave our chametz behind and we recognize where our food comes from. We recognize that God is the creator. I think what God does is he builds in mitzvot that allow us to take a break from creative acts, almost to recalibrate and recognize we are creators that derive our powers from the creator. That's what these Shabbatot do. They take a break so that you can kind of refresh that perspective. So digging deeper into the nature of chametz led us to this profound idea about Shabbos and technology. Originally, humanity was directly connected to the source of its food, but with technologies like bread making and chametz later on, we created distance through our own creativity and ingenuity. And mitzvot like Shabbos and the holidays, they let us bridge that distance by helping us to recognize our true source and taking a step back from dominating nature with our own creativity. But now we have to figure out what's going on with the 4 laws we started off talking about. These laws that seemed connected to the holidays, but actually apply all year round. If we're not a Luddite religion, we just take little breaks from creativity for a few days a year, why is chametz not ever allowed in the temple? Beth has some thoughts about that.
It's not that chametz in general is bad, so it's okay for me to eat a sandwich on just a Stam Tuesday, but there's something. If I, little creator, am coming before God, big creator, and I'm offering a korban, there's something audacious or there's something offensive about bringing chametz as that korban. It's like rubbing my creativity, my ability in my creator's face. So it makes sense to me that would be a domain in which we're told not to do it.
Exactly. When you're otherwise engaged in a ritual where you're recognizing source, Are you going to bring chametz, which is this highly processed bread, which is sort of opaque? It's not transparent about its source. It is highly processed and therefore offensive to bring that before your source. What Beth is suggesting is that even though there are built-in Shabbases that have us take a break from creativity and overdominance of the natural world and reconnect with source, maybe there are other laws that aren't bound to a particular time period that have us do the same. And maybe that's what our 4 laws, including milk and meat, are there to help us with. Not bringing chametz in the mikdash, maybe that's about being respectful to God by not touting our own ability to create in the place devoted to recognizing Him as our source. And now that we've seen how this principle explains the first law, Beth and I start thinking about how it might do the same for the rest. So let's take this value of the holiday into lo yalin chelev chagi ad boker, right? You should not leave over the holiday offering till the next morning. How might you see that as an expression of this idea?
The way that it first landed for me was, I don't know, I'm imagining that people come to your house for Shabbos, you open up a bottle of wine, and then at the end of the meal, you take the half-drunk bottle and pour it into another bottle so that you can squirrel it away and use it for your guests next week. It feels like it wasn't given in the spirit of giving in the first place.
Mm-hmm. And I would say it wasn't given in the spirit of recognizing who you are vis-a-vis God, right? Think about the kind of person who considers taking the leftovers of a korban back home. Let's assume he's not a bad guy, right? What's his motivation? So I think the obvious idea is that, meat, animals, they're expensive. If I can be yotzei my korban, if I can discharge my obligation here by eating 2 pounds of London broil and saving the other 100 pounds of cow for later, isn't that just smart? I'm avoiding being wasteful of my hard-earned property. So I think the Torah, by grouping this law where it does, is signaling to us that, if that's our perspective, that's off. Because that all rides on the assumption that the cow is mine, that I have real ownership and dominion over it. But that doesn't work in the context where we're standing in front of source. The source of this cow, we're returning it to Him, as it were. It's not just that it's crass to take back a gift, it's that your whole perspective is out of whack. You can't bring over-processed bread in the temple, a place dedicated to recognizing God as source. And you can't express objectification of property, of animals in a korban, an activity dedicated to recognizing source. And then for you not to even recognize what you're doing to the point where you want to eat the whole thing or bring over the leftovers, that's crazy. It's out of whack. You're not recognizing the source in front of you. So that explains the first 2 laws and how they're extensions of this principle of recognizing source. Let's keep going and extend the idea now into the last 2 laws.
Okay, so Bikurim makes perfect sense. You could take the first and choicest of your crops and hoard them in your storehouse, but as a nod to where they come from, as a nod to the fact that God sent the rains and every other means necessary for you to be able to grow them, then it's appropriate for you to offer them up and not be so concerned with your balance sheet.
Yeah, exactly. And Bikurim, I think, we don't live in the wake of the agricultural revolution anymore, many thousands of years behind us, but this is the height of human creativity, right? These are my capital gains. This is my first paycheck, or, my stock has appreciated in value. And you're actually, at the height of your own creativity, you think of yourself as master, as powerful. It's actually kind of interesting. I was just talking to our editor, Daniel, before this session, but there are no biblical holidays in the winter, right? Because in the winter, it's so easy to recognize God. You need Him. Your storehouses are dwindling. There is no new prophet coming in. So I'm not deluded into thinking that I'm the master, right? It's very clear that I am dependent. But Bikurim is that moment, that first fruit moment of, wow, I'm awesome. My paycheck's coming in. At that moment, we actually choose to recognize Master Creator first. We recognize God first, and then we're able to eat the rest of the fruits. Yeah, another way of saying this is that if you didn't bring Bikurim, you could fall prey to being over-dominant, of objectifying your property and your fruits and thinking, mine, it's all mine. So we bring Bikurim, and that helps us recognize that the source of our fruits is God.
That's very cool.
And now that we've seen everything we've seen, we're finally ready to come back and try to understand Lo tevashel gdi b'chalev imo. So when we have this idea of recognition of source in mind, here's what's kind of obvious. We think about not mixing milk and meat together. We think of it as, I'm not going to have meat, I'm not going to have dairy. Where does dairy come from?
This was a revelation for me when I started nursing. Yeah, so right, milk is created by a mother for the purpose of feeding their young. That's true for cows. It's true for humans too. I mean, not all human mothers are able to breastfeed their babies, but if you're asking what milk is and where it comes from, it's a product of this special relationship between mother and child.
100%. Like when I say dairy, you think cheese.
Yeah.
But when I say milk, you must think mother. All milk comes from mother. And how does a mother get milk, right? It's not like all women have milk all the time. When do you have milk?
When you have a new baby. Your body makes milk so you can feed the baby, and your body only keeps producing because the baby keeps nursing.
Exactly. So you're in a position to have milk only when you're dealing with a new mother, right?
Yeah.
It's not just like a mom who had a 10-year-old kid. This is a new mother who has a baby.
Right. No, it's a crazy idea. And the fact that milk is an ingredient that we then use in our culinary world, and that, like, not just that you can pour yourself a glass of milk to drink, but also that, like you said, that we have cheese and yogurt and ice cream and all these things. It's just because we as humans like intercepted this biological reality. Like, oh, look, there's some cows out there who just had babies, and the mothers are making the milk for the calves. But if I can get in there and actually, express the milk from the cows, not into the calves' mouths, but into a bucket, then now I have this ingredient that I can bring into my kitchen. But it's wild. It feels very invasive.
It's invasive and it's objectifying. You're taking a relationship between a mother and a child and treating, right, the milk that comes out of the mother as if it's an ingredient.
Yeah.
And you're able to use milk together with flesh. And that's a crazy concept when you're actually aware of where milk comes from. So now that we're seeing milk through the lens of recognition of source, thinking about where it actually comes from, I think we're in a position to answer one of our first questions about how the rabbis read this verse and said it's not just about kids and their mother's milk, but about all meat and all milk. I think they read this verse and they saw it as hyperbole, presenting the law in its most extreme form to drive home the point. The sages were reading this verse and understanding that the Torah's sensitizing you to the fact that all milk is mother's milk and all animals are kids. All animals come from a mother. You can't take this thing that a mother uses to nurture a child and cook that same animal in it. That would be offensive, right? Like all the previous laws were offensive. You don't bring bikurim, that's offensive. You're going to take Tupperware, you're going to take leftovers from the korban that was for us, that's offensive. You're going to take Chametz, this over-processed food, to God and contribute it to him, that's offensive. To take milk that is meant for a child and cook it with that animal, it's deeply offensive. But I'm not just focused on the offense, which is obvious and clear. The other thing that I want to focus on is the opportunity to recognize source. The opportunity, right? Bikurim is a wonderful thing. Bikurim is like a great bracha. Before you eat, before I get to enjoy my fruits, I actually just give to God. And in doing that, I recognize that all my fruits really come from God. What's strange about Lo tevashel gdi b'chalev imo, it's the only one of the set that has nothing to do with God. And yet, you have an animal that you're supposed to recognize the animal source. And the animal source is mother. You're not going to take mother's milk and mix it together with the animal itself. So the common denominator is really being mindful of all sources and letting that awareness impact on our dominion over nature.
The way that you're inviting me to think about this law, I'm also thinking about the fact that I might not have had a relationship with that goat, and I might not really be aware of the gravity of, that a life was extinguished so that I could enjoy it. But do you know who cares? Like, who cares is their mom, yeah. And it's a reminder that everyone is someone's kid. So no pun intended.
But we're seeing this again and again. Like, that was the punchline of the last Kashrut piece we did. where we looked at the laws of slaughtering animals and covering the blood, and we kind of had two ways of looking at it. But the bottom line was, no matter how you take the kashrut laws, whether it's lechatchila or b'di'eved, whether it's proper or a concession, the kashrut laws slow us down, and they make us take something like the taking of the life of an animal very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, what we said is that when you do take the life of the animal, you do need to recognize source. You actually return blood to earth, our common source, right? Earth is where we come from, Adama, and the animal comes from, its dam comes from the Adama as well,
Mm-hmm.
and we return it to source. You do need to, when you eat the animal, recognize source.
Mm.
And there is a way to do that properly when you do shrita. There isn't a way to do that properly when you mix milk and meat together. It's just not possible. There's no, you can't like thank the mom and thank the baby and then eat the two together. It just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So those have to be kept separate. So we're almost done, but there's still one more loose end that we need to tie up. We said before that all four of the laws also have a holiday dimension, but what is the holiday dimension of Lo Tevashel G'ti B'Chalev Imo? What's the holiday? Right? We do have the first two laws are Pesach laws that would suggest that the second two laws are Shavuot laws. And the truth is, this is a little bit speculative. I can't know that this is 100% right, but the algebra does suggest that this is a Shavuos idea. And look, maybe here's a reason how. You know, while I was researching this piece, I happened to be at a Shabbos table where someone was talking about why it is that we eat dairy on Shavuos. And what they said is that even though we're used to babies being born all year round, right? Like people have their birthdays in February and November. It's likely that back in the day, domesticated animals actually gave birth seasonally. Like there was one season where the babies were born. There was something called calving season. And that season was probably the spring.
Slow down with me for a second. That means the idea is that animals go into heat, like they're triggered somehow by the calendar.
I don't know all the specifics, but I do believe that it's in the winter. It's not advantageous to have children. There is no readily available food. But as the whole world is sort of reborn, and right there's this spring, new food bursts into life. That's when babies are born as well, so that their mothers will have plenty to eat to keep up their supply of milk. And then, if that's happening in the spring, so fast forward to the beginning of the summer, which is Shavuot. And what's happening? The kids, they're all weaning. They've all been fattened up, and they don't need the milk of their mother anymore, which means that the mothers all have milk that no one's using. So there's this abundance of baby livestock and this abundance of milk right around Shavuos. And what the Torah is telling you, that when you have all of this wealth, of all the milk and all the new babies, you still have to recognize that relationship between mother and child. Enjoy the milk. You can even eat the animals, but keep those two things separate. So yeah, I'll say again, this is speculative, and if it doesn't land for someone, that totally makes sense. But just looking at the algebra, I think it's really elegant. It fits really well.
That's really cool, Emu. And what I am especially appreciating about it is that, how do I put this? It's like how, it reminds me of the Chametz thing too. You can do it, but I'm going to put parameters around it, but I'm going to regulate it. And that's going to get you to think. And that's what we're seeing here too, which is it's not God coming and saying, you have to be vegan. You're not allowed to eat meat and you're not allowed to drink milk. You can, but you have to do it in this way.
So with this understanding of separating milk and meat as a way of recognizing where it all comes from, what milk and meat really are, and the insensitivity of using them together like they were just any ingredients, Beth and I take a step back and wonder how this changes the way we relate to this law and the way we observe it.
I think up until this point, separating milk and meat it's just been a technical thing. It's been a technical thing, and now it stands for a value. And so I'm energized. It's like, bring on the questions. The next time that a friend asks me, what's that about? Or when I have the opportunity to explain it to my kids, I wanna go there. It's meaningful for me as a mother, Yeah.
I think the value in and of itself, like knowing the value, it means something.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
it's almost like you don't have to change anything. Like you've always been separating milk and meat. But now kind of means something to you, kind of makes you stop and think or feel. Like you said, It means something to me as a mother.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, milk is filled with so much love. Like, it's such a beautiful thing. Right. And aren't our lives so much richer in appreciating that? Like when you open up the fridge and you take out a gallon of milk, it's like it's an ingredient, or it's a reminder that God set up the world in this just gorgeous way, which is that every new creature that's born into the world is born from the body of a mother who loves them and is there to teach them that I'm going to meet all your needs. And that's their infancy. And that's just stunning. And milk can be a reminder of all of that.
Yeah, I think that's like the first layer of kashrut is just to stun us into non-objectification, right? Like we're used to treating all food as ingredients. And I think the basic thing we keep seeing in kashrut is comes from somewhere. You come from somewhere. Relate to where you come from. Relate to the earth. Relate to the animals. It's not like you can't eat them. You just eat them in a way that's supposed to remind you of where it comes from. So maybe on the surface, nothing will really be changing for us. But on the inside, the laws of separating milk and meat couldn't be more transformed. They're going from a bunch of complicated and inconvenient rules to an opportunity to slow down, to take a break from objectifying our food, to reflect on the source of our food, and to be aware of what milk is, the maternal love that it embodies. Waiting periods between meat and milk, separate dishes. We're now seeing them as these opportunities to respect the love a mother has for her child. You know, hot dogs and ice cream may not look anything like calves and the milk that nurtures them. But when you see past the form into the essence, that really is what they are. That's how these laws are encouraging us to see our food. And I, for one, I'm grateful for the opportunity that these laws create to transcend the natural impulse that we humans have to be consumers, to dominate, to please ourselves at the expense of others, and instead to enjoy our food as part of a relationship. We are in relationship with the animals that we eat. We are in relationship with the mothers that contribute milk. And we're in relationship with the source of all, with God. I don't know about you, but to me, that feels like a really meaningful way to observe the laws of kashrut. Hey, if you enjoyed this podcast, and I know this is something that everybody asks for, but it really helps us if you could rate it, if you could review it, if you could subscribe to it, if you could share it with a friend. Those things really, really matter. And they actually help us to know whether we should continue doing more of these. So please, please, please.
This episode was recorded by Shalev and Beth Lesch. The scholars for this episode were Shalev and Ari Levison. The senior editor was Daniel Lowenstein, with additional editing by Sarah Penso and Evan Weiner. Our audio editor is me, Hillary Gutman. Our managing producer is Adina Blaustein. Meaningful Judaism's editorial director is Shalev.
Thanks for listening.